The grand auction hall buzzed with energy as the city's wealthiest and most influential people gathered under glittering chandeliers. The room was alive with the soft clink of crystal glasses, the rustle of expensive fabrics, and the low hum of conversations filled with privilege and power. Every corner was adorned with art pieces, sculptures, and displays of luxury items waiting to be sold to the highest bidder. Among the sea of tailored suits and dazzling gowns stood a woman who didn't quite belong. Her dress was simple, her jewelry modest, and her presence unassuming. She moved quietly through the crowd, clutching a small bidding paddle in her hand, like it might somehow shield her from the overwhelming opulence around her. Her name was Clara, though few in the room knew it. She had arrived alone, without the usual entourage of assistants or bodyguards that accompanied many of the other guests. Clara's decision to attend the auction had been spontaneous, driven by curiosity rather than any desire to compete with the elite. Yet as she navigated the polished marble floors, she couldn't help but feel out of place. The air seemed heavy with judgment, and it wasn't long before whispers began to follow her every step. "Who is she?" one woman asked, her voice dripping with disdain. Another replied with a smirk, "Probably just here for the free champagne." Clara tried to ignore the comments, focusing instead on the stunning artwork lining the walls. Each piece told a story, capturing moments of beauty and emotion that resonated deeply with her. Art had always been her escape, a way to connect with something greater than herself. But tonight, even her love for art couldn't shield her from the growing sense of unease. As she paused to admire a painting, a group of impeccably dressed women nearby turned their attention to her. Their laughter rang out sharply, cutting through the ambient noise of the room. One of them, a tall blonde wearing an extravagant gown, leaned closer to her friends and said loudly, "Look at her. Does she even know how much these things cost?" The words stung, but Clara forced herself to remain calm. She had faced worse in her life. Judgment was nothing new to her. Still, there was something particularly cruel about being mocked in such a public setting, surrounded by strangers who didn't know her but felt entitled to tear her down. Determined not to let their words affect her, Clara took a deep breath and continued walking. She reminded herself why she had come: to enjoy the art, to experience something new, and perhaps to prove to herself that she could hold her own in a world so different from her own. But the whispers didn't stop. Everywhere she went, eyes followed her, sizing her up and finding her lacking. Some sneered openly, while others whispered behind cupped hands, their mocking smiles barely concealed. A man in a sharp suit approached her during a brief lull in the proceedings, his tone condescending as he remarked, "You must have saved up for years to afford anything here." His friends chuckled nearby, clearly amused by his boldness. Clara simply nodded, her expression unreadable. "Something like that," she replied softly, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. As the evening progressed, the first item up for auction was unveiled, a breathtaking painting by a celebrated artist. The bidding began almost immediately, with numbers flying back and forth as the wealthy attendees vied for ownership. Clara hesitated for a moment, then raised her paddle timidly. The room fell silent for a split second before someone laughed. "Oh, honey," the same blonde woman from earlier called out, her voice dripping with mockery. "You don't even know what you're doing here." Her friends erupted into giggles, their eyes fixed on Clara with undisguised amusement. To their surprise, Clara didn't back down. Instead, she kept her paddle raised, her determination unwavering. The auctioneer glanced at her briefly before continuing, and soon the bidding shifted focus to others in the room. When the hammer finally came down, Clara's paddle was still in the air, and to everyone's shock, she had won the painting. The room buzzed with disbelief. How could this seemingly ordinary woman afford such a valuable piece? Rather than explaining herself or basking in her victory, Clara simply smiled faintly and returned to her seat, leaving the crowd to speculate wildly. Despite the hostile atmosphere, Clara found herself intrigued by the dynamics of the room. These people, for all their wealth and status, seemed consumed by pettiness and insecurity. They judged her based on appearances, assuming they knew everything about her without ever speaking to her. It was ironic, really. She had entered the auction feeling out of place, but now she realized that she possessed something far more valuable than money: authenticity. While the socialites pranced around in their designer outfits, desperate to prove their superiority, Clara remained grounded, content in who she was. Yet, as the night wore on, the tension only grew thicker. More items were brought out, each more extravagant than the last. A vintage sports car, a rare diamond necklace, a private island getaway. With each new offering, Clara found herself drawn into the bidding process, raising her paddle quietly but confidently. And each time, the reactions from the crowd ranged from disbelief to outright hostility. "She's bluffing," one man muttered, under his breath. "There's no way she can afford all this." Another woman scoffed. "Maybe she's borrowing money from her rich uncle." What they didn't realize was that Clara wasn't bluffing. She wasn't trying to impress anyone or prove a point. For her, the auction was about more than acquiring possessions. It was about challenging herself, stepping outside her comfort zone, and refusing to be intimidated by people who thought they were better than her. And though she didn't know it yet, the real drama of the evening was just beginning. Little did the snickering crowd know Clara's presence at the auction would soon turn their world upside down, forcing them to confront their own prejudices and assumptions in ways they never expected. The second half of the auction began with a flurry of excitement as the MC announced the next item, a vintage sports car that gleamed under the spotlights. Its sleek design and polished finish drew admiring glances from everyone in the room. Bidders leaned forward eagerly, ready to outdo one another for the chance to own such a masterpiece. Clara, however, remained seated quietly, her paddle resting gently on her lap. She watched the initial bids climb higher and higher, her expression calm but thoughtful. As the numbers soared into the millions, a man sitting near Clara turned to his companion and said loudly, "This is getting ridiculous. Who even needs a car like this?" His voice carried across the room, drawing nods of agreement from those around him. But Clara noticed something else in his tone: envy. These people weren't just bidding for the car. They were competing for status, for the thrill of victory over their peers. It was a game she didn't fully understand, nor did she care to play by their rules. When the bidding slowed slightly, Clara raised her paddle again, her movement deliberate but unhurried. The room froze momentarily, the murmurs dying down as all eyes turned to her. Someone snickered audibly, breaking the silence. "Oh, come on," a woman nearby muttered, rolling her eyes dramatically. "She's not serious, is she?" Her friend smirked, adding, "Maybe she thinks it's a toy car." Laughter rippled through the group, but Clara ignored them, keeping her gaze fixed on the auctioneer. To her surprise, the bid was accepted, and the competition resumed. The tension in the room grew thicker with each passing moment. Other bidders tried to outpace Clara, throwing out staggering figures that made jaws drop. Yet every time someone thought they had secured the lead, Clara calmly raised her paddle again. Her quiet persistence baffled the crowd. How could someone so unassuming keep up with billionaires? Was she bluffing? Or was there more to her than met the eye? The questions swirled in the minds of the elite, but no answers came. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the hammer fell and Clara's paddle remained in the air. She had won the sports car. Gasps echoed throughout the hall as the reality sank in. A ripple of disbelief spread among the guests, many of whom struggled to reconcile the image of the modest woman before them with the idea of owning such extravagance. Some stared at her in awe, while others glared with thinly veiled resentment. One man, clearly irritated, leaned over to his partner and grumbled, "What is she trying to prove?" Clara didn't respond to the whispers or stares. Instead, she sat back in her chair, her posture relaxed as if winning a luxury sports car was no big deal. In truth, it wasn't about the car for her. It was about proving to herself that she could stand firm in the face of ridicule. Each time someone mocked her, she chose to rise above it, refusing to let their words define her worth. And though she hadn't planned to spend so much money tonight, She found a strange sense of satisfaction in knowing that she could hold her own in a world that seemed determined to push her aside. The next item up for auction was a rare diamond necklace, its brilliance catching the light with every slight movement. As soon as it was unveiled, the atmosphere shifted. This wasn't just jewelry. It was a symbol of power, wealth, and exclusivity. The bidding started at an astronomical figure, and within seconds, the room erupted into chaos. Voices overlapped as bidders shouted out increasingly outrageous sums, desperate to claim the prize. Clara observed silently, her fingers tapping lightly against her paddle. For a moment, she considered staying out of this round. After all, she had already won 2 items, and the hostility toward her was palpable. But something inside her stirred. Quiet defiance that refused to back down. When the bidding reached a lull, Clara raised her paddle once more. The room went silent, the collective intake of breath almost audible. No one laughed this time, they were too stunned. "Is she serious?" someone whispered, their voice tinged with disbelief. Another guest shook their head slowly, muttering, "She must be insane." Clara paid them no mind, she knew exactly what she was doing. With each new bid, she matched or exceeded the offer, her confidence growing stronger with every passing moment. The battle became a showdown between Clara and a wealthy businessman who clearly wasn't used to losing. He threw out number after number, his jaw tightening as Clara continued to match him. Finally, he leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as he called out a figure so high that the entire room gasped. For a brief moment, it seemed like Clara might step back. But then, without hesitation, she raised her paddle one final time. The auctioneer paused, scanning the room for any counteroffers. When none came, he brought the hammer down with a resounding thud. Clara had won. The room exploded into murmurs and exclamations. People craned their necks to get a better look at her, their expressions ranging from shock to admiration. Even the businessman who had been outbid looked at her with a mixture of respect and frustration. Clara, however, showed no sign of triumph. She simply smiled faintly as if to say, "I told you I could do it." Just as the MC prepared to announce the next item, the doors at the back of the hall swung open dramatically. Every head turned to see a tall, impeccably dressed man stride in, his presence commanding immediate attention. It was Alexander Hartwell, one of the richest men in the world, and unmistakably Clara's husband. Whispers rippled through the crowd as recognition dawned on their faces. "That's Alexander Hartwell," someone exclaimed. Another muttered, "No wonder. She wasn't intimidated by us." Alexander walked directly to Clara's side, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. His expression was calm yet firm as he surveyed the room, silently daring anyone to challenge them. The same people who had mocked Clara earlier now avoided, his gaze suddenly aware of how wrong they had been to judge her. Alexander exchanged a brief loving glance with Clara before addressing the crowd. "Thank you all for making tonight memorable," he said smoothly, his voice carrying effortlessly across the hall. "My wife has always believed in living authentically, regardless of appearances. Perhaps some of you will take inspiration from her grace under pressure." With that, the Hartwells exited the hall arm in arm, leaving behind a room full of stunned faces. Over the following days, news of the incident spread far and wide, capturing headlines and sparking debates about class, humility, and judgment. Many of those present admitted privately that they felt ashamed of their behavior, while others couldn't stop talking about the elegance with which the Hartwells handled the situation. For Clara, the experience became a testament to staying true to oneself. And though she never sought validation from the glittering elite, she earned something far more valuable: their respect. From then on, whenever people spoke of the Hartwells, they did so with admiration, knowing they had witnessed not just wealth but genuine character. As the Hartwells stepped out of the auction hall, the cool night air wrapped around them like a comforting embrace. Clara exhaled deeply, her shoulders relaxing for the first time that evening. She hadn't realized how tense she had been until now, standing beside Alexander under the soft glow of the streetlights. For a moment, they simply stood there in silence, enjoying the quiet after the storm they had just weathered. The chaos of the auction, the whispers, the sneers, It all felt distant now, like a bad dream fading into the past. Alexander broke the silence with a chuckle, his voice warm and filled with pride. "You were incredible in there," he said, turning to look at her. His eyes sparkled with admiration as he added, "I've always known you're stronger than anyone gives you credit for, but tonight, you proved it to the whole world." Clara smiled faintly, though there was a hint of sadness in her expression. She shook her head slightly and replied, "I didn't do it for them. I did it for me. I just wanted to show myself that I could handle their judgment without letting it break me." Her words struck a chord with Alexander, who reached out to take her hand in his. He squeezed it gently, his touch reassuring. "And you did," he said firmly. "But now, thanks to you, they'll think twice before underestimating someone based on appearances. That's no small thing, Clara. You've given them a lesson they won't forget anytime soon." Clara nodded slowly, her gaze drifting toward the horizon. She knew he was right, but part of her wished she hadn't needed to prove anything at all. Still, she couldn't deny the sense of accomplishment she felt, not because of the items she had won, but because of the strength she had discovered within herself. Back inside the auction hall, the buzz of conversation had reached a fever pitch. Guests gathered in small clusters, their voices overlapping as they dissected what had just happened. "Did you see the way she kept bidding?" one woman asked, her tone equal parts disbelief and awe. "She didn't even flinch when people laughed at her." Another man chimed in, scratching his head. "And then her husband walks in. Alexander Hartwell, of all people. I can't believe we didn't recognize her sooner." The room was alive with speculation, each person trying to piece together the puzzle of Clara's identity. For some, the revelation brought a wave of guilt. The same people who had mocked her earlier now replayed their words in their minds, cringing at how cruel they had been. "We really misjudged her," one woman admitted quietly to her friend. "She wasn't bluffing or pretending. She was just being herself." Her friend nodded, adding, "And we treated her like she didn't belong. No wonder she didn't say much. She probably knew exactly who she was dealing with." Others, however, refused to acknowledge their mistakes. A few guests muttered defensively about how Clara had tricked them, as if her quiet confidence had somehow been an act designed to embarrass them. Meanwhile, news of the incident began to spread beyond the walls of the auction hall. Social media lit up with posts and photos from attendees, each trying to capture the drama of the evening. Hashtags like Clara Hartwell and Auction Night quickly trended, drawing attention from people far outside the elite social circle. Journalists scrambled to cover the story, eager to uncover more about the woman who had stunned the wealthy elite. Headlines ranged from playful, simple woman shocks billionaires at luxury auction, to reflective, the night humility outshone wealth. It seemed everyone had an opinion about Clara and her unexpected rise to fame. As the days passed, Clara found herself thrust into the spotlight in ways she hadn't anticipated. Reporters called her phone incessantly, begging for interviews. Friends and acquaintances sent messages congratulating her, or in some cases asking for favors. Strangers stopped her on the street, wanting to shake her hand or snap a selfie. At first, Clara found it overwhelming. She wasn't used to being the center of attention, let alone dealing with the scrutiny that came with it. But over time, she learned to navigate the chaos with the same grace she had shown at the auction. Through it all, Alexander remained by her side, shielding her from the worst of the madness. He handled the press inquiries, politely declining most requests while steering others toward charitable causes close to their hearts. Together, they turned the unexpected publicity into an opportunity to give back. They donated several of the auction items to museums and nonprofits, ensuring that the art and treasures would be enjoyed by many, rather than hidden away in private collections. Clara also used her newfound platform to speak about issues she cared deeply about, such as education and women's empowerment. Her speeches resonated with audiences, inspiring countless individuals to embrace their own authenticity. Despite the whirlwind of attention, Clara never lost sight of what truly mattered to her. She continued to live her life simply, refusing to let wealth or fame change who she was at her core. Her days were spent volunteering at local shelters, reading books in quiet corners of libraries, and taking long walks through the park. These small moments brought her joy, reminding her of the values she had always held dear. And though the world now saw her as extraordinary, Clara knew she was still the same person she had always been. A woman who believed in kindness, resilience, and staying true to oneself. One evening, as Clara sat on the balcony of their penthouse apartment gazing out at the city skyline, Alexander joined her. He handed her a cup of tea and sat down beside her, his presence comforting as always. "Do you ever miss the quiet life?" he asked softly, his voice tinged with curiosity. Clara took a sip of her tea, considering the question. After a pause, she replied, "Sometimes. But I think the quiet is still here, it's just inside me. All the noise from the outside doesn't change who I am." Alexander smiled, leaning over to kiss her forehead. "That's why I love you," he said simply. "You remind me every day that real wealth isn't about money or status, it's about character." As the stars twinkled above them, Clara felt a deep sense of peace. The events of the auction had tested her in ways she hadn't expected, but they had also revealed her inner strength. She had faced judgment and ridicule, yet she had emerged stronger and wiser. More importantly, she had inspired others to rethink their assumptions and embrace humility. In a world obsessed with appearances, Clara had proven that true worth lies not in what you wear or how much you own, but in the courage to stay true to yourself no matter what. The days following the auction were a whirlwind for Clara. Everywhere she went, people recognized her face, on the streets, in cafes, even at the grocery store. Some approached her with genuine admiration, thanking her for standing up to the elite crowd and proving that wealth wasn't everything. Others stared from afar, whispering among themselves about the simple woman who had outbid billionaires. Clara tried her best to stay grounded, reminding herself that this sudden fame was fleeting, but it wasn't easy. The constant attention weighed on her, making her long for the quiet anonymity she once cherished. Despite the chaos, Clara found solace in small routines. Each morning, she woke up early, brewed a pot of tea, and sat by the window as the sun rose over the city. These moments of stillness became her refuge, a reminder that life hadn't changed as much as it seemed. She continued to volunteer at the local shelter, serving meals to those in need and listening to their stories. To her, these interactions were far more meaningful than any headline or social media post. The people she met at the shelter didn't care about her newfound celebrity status. They valued her kindness and willingness to help. Alexander noticed how hard Clara worked to maintain her sense of normalcy. He admired her resilience but worried about the toll it might take on her. One evening, as they sat together in the living room, he gently broached the subject. "You don't have to keep doing everything alone," he said, his voice soft but firm. "If all this is too much, we can step back. We don't owe anyone anything." Clara looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. She knew he meant well, but stepping back wasn't an option for her. "I'm not doing this for them," she replied. "I'm doing it because I believe in what's right. If my story can inspire even one person to be kinder or braver, then it's worth it." Her words struck a chord with Alexander, who realized just how deeply Clara cared about using her platform for good. Together, they decided to channel the attention into something positive. They announced plans to host a charity gala, inviting not only the wealthy elite, but also everyday people who shared their passion for giving back. The event would raise funds for education programs, healthcare initiatives, and community projects. Clara hoped it would bridge the gap between different worlds, showing that everyone had something valuable to contribute, regardless of their background or bank account. As preparations for the gala began, Clara threw herself into the work wholeheartedly. She met with organizers, visited schools and hospitals, and spoke with volunteers to understand their needs. Her hands-on approach earned her respect from those involved, many of whom were initially skeptical of her intentions. "She's not just putting her name on it," one volunteer remarked during a planning meeting. She's really invested in making a difference." Word spread quickly, and soon the gala was generating buzz, not just among the rich and famous, but across the entire city. On the night of the gala, the venue was transformed into a dazzling space filled with lights, music, and laughter. Guests arrived dressed in their finest, eager to support the cause. Among them were some familiar faces from the auction, including the blonde woman who had mocked Clara so openly. This time, however, there was no sneering or smirks. Instead, the woman approached Clara hesitantly, holding out her hand. "I wanted to apologize," she said, her voice sincere. "What I said that night was wrong, and I regret it. You've shown us all what real strength looks like." Clara accepted the apology graciously, offering a warm smile. "Thank you for saying that," she replied. "We all make mistakes, but the important thing is learning from them." The woman nodded, visibly relieved, before stepping aside to join the festivities. Moments like these reminded Clara why she had chosen to embrace this new chapter in her life. It wasn't about revenge or proving a point. It was about fostering understanding and creating connections where none had existed before. Throughout the evening, Clara moved effortlessly through the crowd, speaking with guests and sharing stories about the impact of their donations. She introduced Alexander to families whose lives had been changed by similar initiatives, highlighting the importance of collective effort. Watching her interact with such ease and authenticity, Alexander felt a swell of pride. He had always known Clara was special, but seeing her inspire others firsthand was something else entirely. By the end of the night, the gala had raised millions for charity, a record-breaking amount that left everyone stunned. As the final tally was announced, the room erupted into applause, with many guests pledging additional contributions. Clara stood at the center of it all, humbled by the outpouring of support. She took a moment to address the crowd, her voice steady and heartfelt. "Tonight isn't about me," she said, looking around at the sea of faces. "It's about all of you and the incredible things we can achieve when we come together. Let's keep this spirit alive, not just tonight, but every day." Her words resonated deeply with the audience, sparking conversations that carried on long after the event ended. People left the gala feeling inspired, vowing to carry forward the message of unity and compassion. For Clara, the success of the evening wasn't measured in dollars, but in the seeds of change that had been planted. She knew the road ahead wouldn't always be smooth, but she was ready to face whatever challenges came her way. In the weeks that followed, Clara and Alexander continued their efforts, expanding their reach to communities beyond the city. They traveled to rural areas, meeting with teachers, farmers, and local leaders to understand their struggles and offer solutions. Clara often found herself reflecting on how much her life had changed since the auction. What had started as a single act of defiance had grown into a movement, one that was slowly breaking down barriers and challenging stereotypes. Yet, despite her growing influence, Clara remained humble. She never sought recognition or praise, focusing instead on the work itself. Her belief in humanity's capacity for goodness kept her going, even on days when progress felt slow. And though the world now saw her as a symbol of strength and resilience, Clara knew the truth. She was simply a woman doing her best to live authentically and make a difference. As the weeks turned into months, Clara's life settled into a rhythm that balanced her newfound role as a public figure with her desire to stay grounded. The media attention had died down somewhat, but her name still carried weight in conversations about philanthropy and social change. People admired her not just for her wealth or her actions at the auction, but for the quiet determination she showed in everything she did. Clara didn't seek the spotlight, yet it seemed to find her anyway. Whether through interviews she reluctantly agreed to give, or events where her presence inspired others to contribute more generously. One morning, as Clara sorted through letters and emails from people who had been touched by her story, she came across a note that stood out. It was from a young woman named Emily, who wrote about how Clara's courage had encouraged her to pursue her dreams despite facing ridicule from peers. "I used to think I wasn't good enough because I didn't fit in," Emily confessed in the letter. "But hearing about you made me realize that being different isn't something to be ashamed of. It's something to celebrate. Clara read the words over and over, her heart swelling with emotion. This was why she kept going, even when the pressure felt overwhelming. Determined to connect with people like Emily, Clara began hosting small workshops and mentorship programs aimed at empowering women and young girls. She invited speakers from diverse backgrounds, artists, entrepreneurs, activists, and encouraged open discussions about overcoming adversity. These gatherings weren't glamorous affairs. They took place in community centers and libraries, with mismatched chairs and homemade snacks. Yet the energy in the room was electric, fueled by shared experiences and a collective belief in the power of resilience. Alexander supported Clara every step of the way, often joining her at these events and pitching in wherever needed. He helped set up tables, greeted attendees, and even gave talks about his own journey toward using wealth responsibly. Together, they created an atmosphere of inclusivity where everyone felt welcome regardless of their background. For Clara, these moments were some of the most rewarding. They reminded her of the importance of staying connected to real people and real issues, rather than getting lost in the trappings of privilege. Despite her efforts, there were still challenges. Some critics accused Clara of using charity work as a way to polish her image after the auction incident. Others dismissed her initiatives as superficial, claiming that true change required systemic reform rather than individual acts of kindness. Clara listened to these criticisms without defensiveness, acknowledging that no single person could solve all the world's problems. But she also believed that every act of compassion mattered, no matter how small. Change starts somewhere, she often said during interviews. If we wait for the perfect moment, we'll never do anything. Her philosophy resonated deeply with those around her, including members of the elite circles she had once clashed with. Many of the same people who had mocked her at the auction now reached out to collaborate on projects or offer resources. Some admitted privately that they had underestimated her, not just her financial means, but her strength of character. One evening at a fundraising dinner, a man approached Clara with a sheepish smile. "You taught us a lesson we won't forget," he said. "We judged you too quickly, and we're sorry for that." Clara accepted the apology graciously, though. She knew it wasn't just about her. It was about breaking down barriers and challenging assumptions that divided people. She saw glimpses of progress everywhere, in the friendships formed between unlikely allies, in the growing number of volunteers stepping forward to help, and in the stories of individuals whose lives had been transformed by the programs she supported. Slowly but surely, the walls that separated us from them began to crumble. Amidst all the activity, Clara made time for herself and Alexander. They took weekend trips to the countryside, escaping the noise of the city to recharge. During these quiet moments, they talked about their hopes for the future, not just for themselves, but for the causes they cared about. Alexander often teased Clara about her relentless drive, calling her the unstoppable force. But his tone was always affectionate, filled with admiration for the woman who had become his partner in every sense of the word. One day, while visiting a rural school funded by their foundation, Clara met a little girl named Lily. The child clung to her hand shyly, her wide eyes full of curiosity. When Clara asked what she wanted to be when she grew up, Lily replied softly, "I want to be like you." The answer caught Clara off guard, bringing tears to her eyes. She knelt down to meet Lily's gaze, holding her hands gently. "You can be anything you want," Clara told her. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." That moment stayed with Clara long after she left the school. It reminded her of the ripple effect of kindness, the way one person's actions could inspire another, creating a chain reaction of hope and possibility. She thought about Emily, Lily, and countless others whose lives intersected with hers, however briefly. Each of them carried a piece of her story forward, spreading its message in ways she might never fully understand. Back home, Clara reflected on how far she had come since the night of the auction. What had started as a personal challenge to prove to herself that she could rise above judgment had grown into something much larger. She hadn't planned to become a symbol of resilience or a catalyst for change, but she embraced the responsibility with grace and humility. Her journey wasn't perfect, and there were days when doubt crept in. But she reminded herself that perfection wasn't the goal. Growth was. As the seasons changed, so did Clara. She became more confident in her ability to navigate both the highs and lows of her new life. She learned to laugh at the absurdities of fame, to cherish the quiet moments, and to trust in her instincts. Most importantly, she held on to the values that had guided her from the beginning: authenticity, kindness, and a belief in the inherent worth of every human being. One evening, as she and Alexander strolled along the beach, watching the waves crash against the shore, Clara paused to take it all in. The vastness of the ocean mirrored the enormity of what she had accomplished, not alone but alongside so many others who shared her vision. She turned to Alexander, a soft smile playing on her lips. "Do you think we're making a difference?" she asked, her voice tinged with wonder. Alexander wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "Of course we are," he replied. "And if we're not, then at least we're trying. That's what matters." Clara nodded, feeling a deep sense of peace. No matter what lay ahead, she knew she would face it with the same quiet strength that had carried her this far. After all, she wasn't just building a legacy, she was living one day by day, heart by heart. As the years passed, Clara's influence continued to grow, though she remained as humble and grounded as ever. The initiatives she and Alexander had started blossomed into something far greater than either of them could have imagined. Schools in underserved areas received funding for new classrooms and technology. Hospitals expanded their services, providing care to patients who otherwise would have gone untreated. Community centers became hubs of creativity and learning, offering programs that brought people together across generations and backgrounds. Clara often visited these places, not as a wealthy benefactor, but as a friend who wanted to see firsthand how her efforts were making an impact. One crisp autumn morning, Clara found herself standing in front of a newly renovated library in a small town outside the city. It was a modest building, painted a cheerful shade of blue with flower boxes lining the windowsills. Inside, children sat cross-legged on colorful rugs, listening intently as a storyteller read aloud from a picture book. Adults browsed shelves stocked with books donated by supporters, while volunteers helped seniors sign up for free computer classes. Clara watched it all unfold with a sense of quiet pride. This was what mattered: real change happening quietly, without fanfare or headlines. Later that day, during a brief ceremony to celebrate the library's reopening, the mayor of the town stepped forward to thank Clara and Alexander for their generosity. "This place is more than just a building," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "It's a symbol of hope and opportunity for our community. Because of you, we can dream bigger and aim higher." Clara listened humbly, her cheeks flushing, slightly at the praise. When it was her turn to speak, she kept her words simple and heartfelt. "This isn't my achievement. It's yours," she told the crowd gathered before her. "You're the ones who will bring this space to life, filling it with laughter, learning, and love." The applause that followed was warm and genuine, reflecting the gratitude of a community that had once felt forgotten. As Clara mingled with the guests afterward, shaking hands and sharing stories, she realized how much she had grown since the night of the auction. Back then, she had been focused on proving herself. To others, yes, but mostly to herself. Now she understood that true fulfillment came not from validation, but from connection. Every smile, every word of thanks reminded her that she was part of something larger than herself. Back home, Clara spent evenings poring over letters and emails from people whose lives had been touched by her work. Some wrote about finding jobs after completing vocational training programs funded by her foundation. Others shared stories of children excelling in school because they finally had access to resources they needed. There were also messages from strangers who simply wanted to express their admiration for her courage and kindness. Each one reinforced her belief that even the smallest acts of compassion could create ripples of change. Despite the successes, there were still challenges. Not every project went smoothly, and not everyone agreed with her methods. Critics accused her of being too idealistic, arguing that systemic issues required more than goodwill and donations. Clara didn't shy away from these criticisms. Instead, she welcomed them as opportunities to learn and adapt. She surrounded herself with advisors and experts who challenged her thinking and pushed her to think bigger. Together, they explored innovative solutions from supporting sustainable agriculture to advocating for policy changes that addressed root causes of inequality. Through it all, Alexander remained her steadfast partner. He admired Clara's ability to stay focused on the mission, even when things got tough. "You have this way of seeing the best in people," he told her one evening as they sat together on their balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink. "Even when they disappoint you, you never lose faith in their potential." Clara smiled softly, leaning her head against his shoulder. "That's because I've seen what happens when people believe in each other," she replied. "It gives them the strength to do incredible things." Their partnership extended beyond personal support. It was a collaboration built on shared values and mutual respect. Whether they were brainstorming ideas for new projects or traveling to remote villages to assess needs, they approached everything as a team. Their relationship served as a model for others, showing that true partnership wasn't about power dynamics but about lifting each other up and working toward common goals. As time went on, Clara began to step back slightly from the public eye, allowing younger voices to take the lead. She mentored emerging leaders, encouraging them to trust their instincts and embrace their unique perspectives. "The world doesn't need another version of me," she often said. "It needs you, your ideas, your passion, your vision." Her humility inspired those around her to step into their own power, knowing they had someone cheering them on every step of the way. One spring afternoon, Clara received an unexpected invitation, a letter from a prestigious university asking her to deliver the commencement address at their graduation ceremony. At first she hesitated, unsure if she was the right person for such an honor. But Alexander encouraged her to accept, reminding her of the countless students she had already inspired through her work. "This is your chance to reach even more people," he said. "Share your story. Not just the victories, but the struggles too. That's what will resonate with them." On the day of the ceremony, Clara stood nervously behind the podium looking out at a sea of eager faces. Graduates clad in caps and gowns sat alongside proud families and friends, their excitement palpable. Taking a deep breath, Clara began to speak. She talked about the night of the auction, not as a tale of triumph but as a moment of self-discovery. She spoke about the importance of staying true to oneself, even when faced with ridicule or doubt. And she urged the graduates to use their talents and privileges to make the world a better place, reminding them that every action, no matter how small, mattered. When she finished speaking, the audience erupted into applause, rising to their feet in a standing ovation. Clara blinked back tears, overwhelmed by the response. As she left the stage, a young graduate approached her, holding out a bouquet of flowers. "Thank you," the student said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Your words gave me hope. I'll carry them with me wherever I go." Clara accepted the flowers with a grateful smile, feeling a surge of joy. This was why she did what she did, not for recognition but for moments like this. In the years that followed, Clara's legacy continued to grow, carried forward by the countless lives she had touched. People remembered her not for her wealth or fame, but for her unwavering belief in humanity's capacity for good. She proved that true strength lies not in titles or possessions, but in the courage to be authentic and the willingness to lift others up. And though Clara never sought to leave a mark on the world, she did, in ways that would endure long after she was gone. One evening, as she sat by the window of her home, watching the stars twinkle above, Clara reflected on her journey. From the timid woman ridiculed at an auction to the beacon of hope celebrated by so many, she had come a long way. Yet, in her heart, she knew she was still the same person. Someone who believed in kindness, resilience, and the power of staying true to oneself. With Alexander by her side and a lifetime of memories to cherish, Clara felt at peace. She had lived a life full of purpose, and that was enough.